The subject of this video is the structures that men and women have built over the ages that make a place unique. Every area of the earth has its own character, depending on its environment. Our environment is a blend of our natural surroundings and those things we add to it.
What are some of the famous human-made landmarks of the British Isles?
We'll start our tour of the British Isles with a look at the Tower of London in London, England. Standing along the Thames River, the Tower of London is probably the city's most popular tourist destination. Actually, the tower is a part of a complex of buildings that were first built in 1066. Over the years, they've been used as a fortress, a prison, a royal residence, a military barracks, an observatory, the Royal Mint, and of course the place where the crown jewels are kept. The people who guard the grounds and buildings are called beefeaters. They're known around the world for their distinctive and colorful wardrobe. Also located on the Thames River is the new Palace of Westminster, commonly called the Houses of Parliament. At the north end of the Parliament building is the 320-foot-high clock tower, whose bell is known as Big Ben. Big Ben was named after Sir Benjamin Hall, who was in charge of the work of the first bell. The huge bell weighs about 13.5 tons and is 7.5 feet high and is 9 feet across. The bell, when first cast, was cracked, but it was later repaired and its E-sharp tone chimes at the beginning of each hour. Smaller bells chime on the quarter hours. The first time Londoners heard Big Ben chime was in 1859. Also located in the British Isles, 8 miles from Salisbury, England, east of London, is one of the most famous and elaborate megaliths, Stonehenge. A megalith is a standing stone monument. Although its early history is somewhat vague, we do know that its first phase of construction was probably started somewhere between 1800 and 2800 BC. A horseshoe arrangement of stones inside a circle still survive today. Although Stonehenge is not the only structure of this sort to exist, it's unique for several reasons. Not only did it continue to be used for a long period of time, but it had a very precise architectural plan. In fact, the placement of the stones is such that during certain times of the year, the sun consistently rises in a specific place, giving support to the theory that Stonehenge was probably designed as an astronomical clock or calendar.
What are some of the famous human-made landmarks of France and Italy?
As we travel to France, we'll visit the city of Paris, home of the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower was built for the Paris Exposition in 1889 and constructed by the French engineer Alexander Gustave Eiffel. This 984-foot structure was created to celebrate the science and engineering achievements of that day and time. Residents and visitors to Paris can get a wonderful view of the city from its observation deck and restaurant. It's remained the world's highest structure until the Empire State Building was erected about 40 years later in New York City. Before leaving Paris, we'll visit the Cathedral of Paris, otherwise known as Notre Dam Cathedral. This Gothic church, located on the Ile de la Cité and dedicated to the Virgin Mary, is well known for its large rose windows, flying buttresses, and wonderful facades. Work began on the cathedral in 1160. Another famous Parisian landmark is the Louvre, one of the world's great art museums. The Louvre began as a royal palace and fortress in the 12th century. It is a series of buildings which took about 4 centuries to construct. The glass pyramid entrance was recently added, providing a controversial yet successful architectural contrast. As we venture into Italy, we'll visit the city of Rome and view the Flavian Amphitheater, commonly called the Coliseum. The impressive amphitheater is located near the southeast end of the Forum, another familiar Roman landmark. It was originally called the Colosseum because it stood next to a 120-foot-high statue, or Colossus, of the Roman Emperor Nero. However, this statue was demolished long ago. When it opened in 80 AD, it could seat about 50,000 spectators who came to watch the games, which included contests between gladiators and men fighting with wild animals. A great deal of this structure is still standing today, although a lot of its masonry is missing, having been used for other buildings during the Middle Ages.
What are some of the famous human-made landmarks of Spain and Greece?
We now move westward to Spain and the city of Granada. It was here that the Moors, Muslims from North Africa, built the Alhambra, a complex of gardens, courts, and inner chambers, or rooms. In the 1200s, it was the royal palace for the last great Moorish dynasty. After the Moors were thrown out of Spain in 1492, the Alhambra became a Christian palace, but it soon took a backseat to the court in Castile. Eventually, after it had been left to go to ruin, it was restored so we can see it today. Our last stop in this region is the capital of Greece, Athens. Here we'll find the Acropolis. Although the literal translation means uppermost city, the word Acropolis also refers to the highest and most defensible part of an ancient Greek city. It was at this Acropolis that the ancient Greeks traditionally built their finest temples to their gods. The largest building on this plateau was the Parthenon. It was made entirely of white marble and was surrounded by many columns. The Parthenon was a temple dedicated to Athena, the patron goddess of Athens. Since that time, it has had many uses, such as churches and even a storehouse for gunpowder. Another structure on the Acropolis is the Temple of Athena Nike. In comparison to the Parthenon, Athena Nike is really quite small. It was taken apart by the Turks in order to use the blocks to build fortifications. It was reassembled in the 1830s and again during the middle of this century. The Erechtheum was a two-level building. The upper floor contained a sanctuary dedicated to Athena, and the bottom floor was used to worship local gods and Poseidon, their god of the sea. The roof of the porch on the south side of the building was supported by 6 columns that were statues of women. This was called the Porch of the Maidens. All the buildings on the Acropolis have suffered through the centuries, especially with the pollution of the modern era. But the Greeks have tried to restore what they could in order to preserve them for future generations.
What are some of the famous human-made landmarks of Russia?
As we move northward towards Russia, we will visit the Kremlin in Moscow. Various Kremlins, or fortresses, can be found in many older Russian cities, but the Kremlin in Moscow is the largest and most well-known. It has served as a fortress, a royal residence, and the seat of government. Its brick wall was built in the late 1400s during the reign of Grand Duke Ivan III. There are many buildings inside the wall. They include the Annunciation Cathedral, which was the private church for the Tsars, the Hall of Facets, so named for the exterior of faceted white stone squares, the White Bell Tower of Ivan III, which houses the world's largest bell, and the Cathedral of the Assumption, where rulers were crowned. This is the oldest of these buildings, dating back to the late 1400s. You can also find the Great Kremlin Palace, where Russia's legislative body meets. The Kremlin's east side faces Red Square, where many parades and demonstrations have taken place. Occupying the southern end of Red Square is the Intercession Cathedral, or the Cathedral of St. Basil the Blessed. This famous church has numerous domes that are all different from one another in design and color. It was built in the mid-1500s to commemorate the defeat of the Tartars by Ivan IV, otherwise known as Ivan the Terrible. Another site we should see in Russia is the city of St. Petersburg. The Russian ruler Peter the Great officially moved the capital of Russia from Moscow to this city in 1712 to give Russia a window on Europe. Because it's located on the delta of the Neva River, it has many river channels and canals. Sometimes it's referred to as the Venice of the North. The center of the city is the Admiralty, one of the oldest parts of the city. Most of St. Petersburg's main avenues converge on this section. Upriver, you can find the Peter and Paul Fortress and its cathedral. Many of the rulers who called St. Petersburg their home are buried there.
What are some of the famous human-made landmarks of the Middle East and India?
For starters, let's visit the country of Israel and the old city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem contains many sites that are sacred to Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. To the followers of Judaism, the Western Wall, or Wailing Wall, is one of the most sacred symbols of Jewish unity and faith. The wall, located on Mount Moriah, is the last remnant of the Holy Temple that stood during biblical times. This courtyard wall is over 140 feet long, and people come here daily to say their prayers. Located near the Western Wall is the famous Dome of the Rock. This golden dome structure was begun in the latter part of the 600s and was built over the rock from which, according to Muslim belief, Muhammad rose to heaven with an angel and talked to God. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is believed to be built on the site where Jesus was crucified and buried. It stands at the end of Via Doloroso, also called the Way of Sorrows. This is considered to be the original route that Jesus took when he carried his cross to Calvary. Traveling to the Indian city of Agra, we can visit one of the most recognized and beautiful buildings in the world, the Taj Mahal. Considered to be the masterpiece of Indian Mughal architecture, it was built by Shah Jahan, the Muslim ruler of India from 1628 until 1658. It was built to serve as the resting place for his beloved wife, whom he affectionately called Mumtaz Mahal, which meant ornament of the palace. She died in childbirth in 1631. The mausoleum is located within a complex of gardens and other buildings. The building is covered with pure white marble, while the surrounding buildings are made of red sandstone.
What are some of the famous human-made landmarks of China and Japan?
One human-made structure that can be seen by astronauts orbiting the Earth is the Great Wall of China. The main part of the wall is about 2,150 miles long, and its total length is about 4,600 miles. It spans from the North Korean border to north-central China. It stands about 25 feet high and is about 15 feet wide at the top. Construction began probably as early as the 400s BC and continued on until the 1600s AD. It was built completely by hand. Various parts of the wall have crumbled or been damaged by earthquakes over the centuries, but a lot of it has been rebuilt or restored. Almost all of the wall that remains today dates back to the Ming Dynasty, which ruled China from 1368 to 1644. It was originally built to keep out invaders from the north. Watchtowers were built 100 to 200 yards apart and were used as lookout posts. The top of the wall was used as a road by the initial builders and later by the soldiers who defended it. The Chinese no longer use the wall for defense, but it has become a favorite destination for tourists from inside China and foreign countries. Another site often visited by tourists and the Chinese people is the Forbidden City, located in Beijing, the capital of China. Enclosed by walls that are sometimes over 30 feet high, this site includes buildings that were used by the imperial or royal families who ruled China between 1421 and 1911. The Forbidden City has distinctive yellow-tiled roofs, white marble terraces, and formal gardens. It's been open to the public as a museum since 1949. As we move eastward over the Sea of Japan, we'll come to the island of Japan. Here we can see many examples of a distinctive type of structure, Shinto shrines. Shinto is the native religion of this island nation. In the Shinto religion, there are innumerable deities called kami. The Japanese built shrines to these deities. These shrines, called jinja, house the sacred objects in which the kami are said to live. You must pass under a sacred arch called a torii, sometimes referred to as a torii gate, before entering these shrines. During this video, we have visited just a few of the unique places and landmarks that exist in the world. We've seen how man and nature have altered our landscape for hundreds and thousands of years. We hope that someday you'll be able to explore these wonderful and exciting places for yourself.